organization. What is the basic purpose of commercial organization? All of you are having some savings out of your monthly salaries and annual salaries, some savings. What do you do with those savings? And I would like to keep this session interactive because it's a concept which is talked and practiced and pondered over by the senior leadership, but my belief is that this concept is to be understood by each and every employee at all the levels. And that is why I'm going to keep this session interactive, and I would like to hear from you guys responses on these questions so that it will be easier for me to achieve the goal of percolating this concept far and wide in the organization. So what do you do with that savings? Invest. And what is the key criteria when you invest? What is the key criteria that you keep in mind when you choose? Okay, safety, returns, more or less, yes. Liquidity, some people. So, like we have a small savings, there are people who have big savings, and they also have the same purpose in mind. So the most important thing is safety and return. Liquidity sometimes is not that important consideration for people who are investing for long term. So what you are saving is, how would you call it? The money that you have saved is your equity. That's your equity, and that is what you try to get maximum return with minimum risk or as limited risk as possible on that. So it's a universal concept that everybody seeks maximum returns with minimum risk. So in simple terms, we can call it risk optimized return. And in financial jargon, it is known as return on equity. So when we went to our investors in the first phase or the second phase or the third phase, everybody asked us, what is that you can offer us as a company? Correct? Is it not the right question to ask? And we have been asked this question by successive investors in last 12 years of journey. What is, if I say, what is the risk-free return in any system? The return offered by the government securities. That's a risk-free return of that system. Not necessarily it is completely risk-free, because there are country risks also being associated, but for that system, the safest return that can be offered is the return on the government security. So if somebody says, or let's say if NCML would have said that I will offer you equivalent to risk-free return rate, would any investor have invested in us? He said, why should I take the risk? Then what would he have looked at? He would have looked at the return, the risk profile of return in last 5, 6, 7 years, or in the comparable industry, what has been the variability in the returns in this industry. So what has been the variability? Many of you are regional managers, state managers, in TNC, some of you have ran your independent laboratories. So all of you would have experienced the variability in the returns. In what range? Give me some numbers. What variability? How much? What has been the range of returns in your areas of experience? Plus and minus 20%. So plus and minus 20% of the previous year, or plus and minus 20% of the target? So let us say this is on the, if let us say you have expected at 10%, so you have experienced between 8 to 12. That's what you're saying. Any other guesses? In our kind of industry, the variability sometimes has been as high as 50%. Because if, let us say, we say our variability is 5% or 6% or 7%, there are some companies in the sector, or any sector for that matter, would have shown higher variability. So that is, the variability is the risk premium, which every investor will focus at. That what is the risk premium I would like to attach to your company, which is a function of multiple things. It's a function of the sector variability, it is a function of the economy variability, it's a function of your company's competence to maintain the variability to bare minimum. So all these things put together, every investor will assign some risk premium. If the risk-free return is, let us say, I'm just giving a number, let's say 8%, and warehousing business, collateral management business, supply chain business, a business which has a similar profile like us, which can be compared to, let us say, a CWC or an SWC in one share, one aspect of our business, or SGS or an Intertech in another component of our business, then let us say they put some variability of 6%, correct, or 7%. So what becomes the expected return from us by the investor? What could be the, because if you say that the average variability defines the expectation of risk premium somewhere around 7%, so what becomes the ROE for that investor? 15%. Industries which have variability as high as, let us say, 15%, and the risk premium comes to 12%, what could be the return on equity expectation from that company or sector? 20%. So the return on equity expectation, it's not cast in stone. It is nothing but the risk-free return of a system and the variability associated with that economy, with that sector, the kind of company that it is, all things put together, the investor will look at what is the return expectation he should keep, where he will not be disappointed if he invests. So if why a higher return on equity expectation is justified when there is a variability? So when we are saying that there is a variability of 12%, what does it mean? Then in 1 year I have made, let us say, my return on equity expectation 20%, and the expectation was met in first year. Second year, the variability hits. The variability in economy hits, the variability in sector hits, the variability in the business hits, and the profits comes down by 25% straight away. So the return on equity in that year comes to only 8%. So what is the average return on equity for 2 years? 20 plus 10, 30 divided by 2. He is still better off on a 2-year period at 15%, correct? So is the return on equity concept is clear to everyone? Now, how many of us influence the return on equity for our company? How many of us influence? Please raise your hands. So only these many people influence the return on equity for our company? So few. How? How does everybody influence? That is the relationship, that is the thread which each one of us will understand, because each one of us stands at some point of that thread which makes this organization, all of us, deliver on the return expectation from us. So let's break this down into 3 simple components. What is the return? Is nothing but PAT divided by sales into return on equity is equal to PAT upon equity, correct? Is this clear? Return on equity from our company is PAT upon equity. If our equity is, let us say, 500 crore rupees, and if our profit target this year is 85 crore rupees, what is the expected return on equity or target return on equity for this year is around 16%, approximately. 540 crore is our net worth, which is the shareholder equity, and 85 crore is the target for 2017-18 financial year. So if I am just doing some basic arithmetic, is it visible to everyone? PAT upon sales. Okay. So just shift it a bit. Yeah. Shift this a bit so that everybody is visible to everybody. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Correct. Is visible? So ROE is equal to PAT upon equity. I've simply added uh, two more variables and rearranged it in the form of a multiplication. So it is PAT upon sales into sales upon capital employed. CE is capital employed, the money that is committed in the organization, which is the shareholders' equity and the loans, the debt that the company has taken to pursue its business. And capital employed divided by equity. So if we simply remove sales to sales cut gaya, capital employed to capital employed cut gaya, it remains the same, PAT upon equity, correct? So now each one of us stands in some component, in some portion of either PAT, sales, capital employed or equity. Now I'll break it up and make you guys realize that what sir has been sharing with you, each one of these tenets influences our ability to remain committed and deliver on the expectation at each point of this thread. So what is PAT in simple terms? Revenue, which is what? P into Q. If we are in a single commodity business or single product business, it is the price at which we have sold and the quantity that we have sold in a year. So it's simply P into Q, price into quantity. And it can be a aggregated price into aggregated, the weighted average or the cumulative of price and quantity that we as an organization sell, minus cost of goods sold. What is the cost of goods sold? All the direct cost. For warehousing, it is the rental that they are paying, the fumigation, the security, the manpower they are deploying, the other incidental costs in the warehouse, in the quality management. It is the cost of CM, CC, audit cost. These are the direct costs. And then there are allocated costs. What are the allocated cost of the head business, cost of the regional manager, cost of the shared services like FAG, IT, HR, all the allocated costs, all the direct and indirect costs. Minus interest, minus depreciation, minus tax. This is the PAT in simple terms, and each one of us influences each component in some way. The people who are directly responsible for revenue, the field teams, is P into Q. Now it's very simple, but it's not easy to achieve, because if you have to grow this revenue, how you can do this? Either you increase P or you increase Q. Is it possible when Sanjeev says, when sir gives us instruction that increase the rental this year by 15%, how many of you willingly accept? How many of you willingly accept? Raise the hand. Nobody, no hand is going up. In CM, when sir says that let's talk to banks for increasing the collateral fee, how many of the regional managers take that challenge and go to bank and say increase it? So it's very difficult. I'm saying it's very difficult to increase the P easily, because it's a function of the market we are in. That's a common rhetoric. But there are ways and means to increase, and those ways and means are what sir was sharing. So when he said that the customer, one of the values that we have, the customer focus, the customer is first. If that customer first is shared and practiced and lived by the whole organization, it will be possible for us to improve the P to some measure. And I'm sure that we have experienced it in S&P in some measure, we have experienced it with SBI, in NCM, we have experienced it in SCM businesses. I'm sure we have experienced it in TNC as well. So this P is directly a function when you are operating in a sector, in a constrained sector where the market forces are in play. The only way to increase the P is differentiation through customer engagement. So there, the value that we have been told to live by will straight away influence our ability positively to change the P without any significant change in the market situation. And how can you increase the Q? Because the economy or any sector has its own organic rate of growth. If the economy is growing, let us say at a nominal growth of 10%, 7% real and 3% inflation, at what rate your individual sectors can grow? Maybe a few percentages more, depending on what is the elasticity of your sector vis-a-vis the overall GDP growth. If let us say your segment is at a high growth portion of the economy, it can possibly grow at 13-14%. So what is the max you can think of is the sector growth itself. But is that good enough? Is that good enough for us as an organization, as a company, that we are happy with the growth that has been granted to us by the nominal growth in GDP and our share of our sector's share in that economy? Is it the right thing to accept? Then how you can create a positive delta over the sector growth is to appropriate market share from competition. There is no other way. If the market is growing at 15%, you will have to outgrow the market by taking share away from the competition. So each one of us who are in the business delivery, both by combining and this engaging with customer will help us in getting market share. So our orientation with customer, our customer first value will help us in achieving both P and Q. And we have experienced that in our SCM businesses. I'm sure we are experiencing it in our TNC businesses, which are highly competitive segments. But wherever we have customer engagement very tight with us, we have been able to influence. So that is where each one of us is obliged to behave in such a fashion to influence our P and Q positively year after year. Now coming to the second component, so either let us say again this will reach a particular number. So P, delta P is possible to how much? Let's say a couple of percentage points, 2%, 3%, 4%, some percentage, let us say X. And we increase the quantity by Y. But if these two things are directly reflected in COGS, you bring the business by increasing P and increasing Q, and simultaneously you say, I need more capacity of warehouses, I need more people to deliver that, I need more offices to be opened. What will happen? There won't be any flow into the bottom line of the company because the change in revenue is equal to change in the cost of goods sold. Is there anything left? Absolutely nothing. So there, the responsibility of each NCML guy as the owner of the organization is that he has to grow both X plus Y, and he has to keep the delta in both direct and indirect cost much lesser than the change in P and Q, which is the ownership. Every owner of a company, whether it's a small shop or it is a service establishment or whatever you call it, he is always looking forward to find ways and means to increase P and Q while keeping the COGS constant. The third thing, which is also, people will say interest is the responsibility of FAG. It is not, because interest has two components, rate and amount. Correct? It has two components. What FAG can control and help us in getting a better value is only on the rate. Who can control the amount on which we pay interest? Who can control? Field. How? Reducing the receivable cycle and extending the payable cycle. As simple as that. So each one of us are responsible for the interest value, if not the rate. Is it or is it not? Every owner will look forward for increasing his payable period by enjoying more and more suppliers credit, and by reducing the receivables period so that the
is directly in relation to the risk of that client. So the risk profile of the company is what you can influence. So if you can influence risk and the perception of the bank towards you, he'll bring down the rate as well. And Ashok, as supporting a risk, can do that. But directly he can't go to the bank and say bring down the rate, because my risk profile has increased. He can only do that because the risk profile has come down.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point because the risk to a company is directly related to the risk quotient perceived by our lenders. Coming to depreciation, can we do something about it at an individual level? Answers. Can we influence the depreciation value that goes into this equation? Any answers? No. Any more no's? Any more? You're reluctant to answer whether you don't know. So I don't think the answer any one of you is thinking in terms of either yes or no because you don't know. Yes, we have an influence on the depreciation as well. The only control that we don't have is on the rate of depreciation because it is fixed by regulation. But we have direct control on the actual usability of the assets that we are given. If we are using an asset which is fully depreciated in my business and I'm still prolonging its life by another 3, 4, 5 years, I'm reducing the depreciation component in my business equation. So we can directly, if a laptop has got a 3 years and I'm using it judiciously for 5 years, I've actually lowered the depreciation component in my business by 40% of my IT cost, approximately. Same thing, there would be some unproductive assets sitting on the balance sheet which is attracting depreciation, but it is not being put to use. Like a good housekeeping, as Sir has said in his that a good housekeeping, a house in order would tell you how much of the resources sitting in my balance sheet which are not being put to use in one region. Can I be aware, can I be conscious about the assets that are sitting in my balance sheet, in my region, in my territory, in my business? Is it being put to use? Do I have a use of it? If I don't, can I talk to other people within the network for sharing and using these assets? So overall, each one of us, the way we look at our house, do we collect clutter? Do we keep on buying things which we don't need? If we do that, essentially it is not only adding to the housekeeping problems, but also it is wasting valuable resources in buying something we don't need. So depreciation is directly influenceable before we put out a requirement. I want this capital asset. Have we explored all other opportunities and avenues where that particular purpose can be served without adding a capital asset? It could be anything. It could be anything. Moisture meters, weighing scales. There's 1,000 things in our organization. If you look at the list of the gross block which attracts depreciation, is every asset that is attracting depreciation is being used productively? That is a question which we as owners, if we answer and be aware of the answer, I think we can influence the depreciation in a significant way. The only thing where none of us can do anything is a tax. Yeah, sure.
One standard example, every day, every MIS we see is that suppose warehouse is not put to use, ready warehouse not put to use for 3 months. So that warehouse incurs depreciation, that incurs interest cost and all. So if we can control that, definitely we can control depreciation as well as interest both.
Correct. So I'm coming to the capital employed. I'm coming to the capital employed section because this is only the first thing, which is the PAT. I have not gone to the remaining two things. 5 minutes. I started at 9:15, so yeah, 5 minutes, correct. Okay. So this equation is clear to all of us. What is the second component in the equation? Capital employed. Sales upon capital employed. What is it? What it is called in the financial jargon? Operational leverage. This is called operational leverage. How much sweating we are giving to our assets. All our assets, which is the equity plus loan, is sitting in some form of the asset. So this is the operational leverage which Ashok is talking, is that a warehouse is incurring not only depreciation but also interest, but is not being utilized fully. So we are not sweating that asset well. So we have to be very, very clear that whatever assets, and eventually we will, once we have more sophisticated thing, we will at some point of time in coming years, we will reach that we will allocate capital employed to business leaders. We will do capital employed to each and every regional manager, area manager, how much capital employed, and how much sales is doing. So each of us as owner has to be aware that how much capital employed I am using in my business, in my segment, in my territory, and how I can do that. Just a simple example, today we're talking about a warehouse, a fixed warehouse or a warehouse on lease. How many ways the sales can be improved in that warehouse? Better occupancy. What else? CM and CMP. What else? VMI, quality testing, procurement fee. So there are multiple ways on the same capital employed in a warehouse, the sales can be increased. Rentals, interest income, processing fee, testing and inspection fee, market yard if we can get clients who want to buy and sell on the basis of warehousing based sales. So multiple ways that each one of us can influence the sales. So I hope this aspect is very clear that each one of us is responsible for the capital employed given to us in our respective business and territory. Coming to the third thing is the capital employed upon equity. This is very important thing, absolutely important, because whenever I ask Shriram from where the business will come, he says, I need more money. If you need more money, Ashok will say that I have a cap on the debt equity ratio. I cannot give you more than that. So if you have to increase the money available for you, I will have to bring in more equity. Is that not the discussion we do every year, every business plan? We have to be consciously aware that if we can work out the crop seasons, the customer profile, the selection of the geography, where without infusing more equity, if we can churn this capital employed on a multiple basis. So that is where this is called financial leverage. And financial leverage has limitation, which is guided by the prudent debt equity protocol of every organization or the investor who owns the company in majority. So these are the three components, and I need to sum it up within next 2 minutes, is that each one of us are actually owners of our organization and responsible and committed to deliver return on equity, and each one of us is capable to do that. We just need to be mindful, conscious, and align all our acts, and all these things what has been discussed, the value system of NCML, the Stephen Covey's effective habits, everything. If we start practicing genuinely, we start internalizing, I'm sure that we'll become true owners, which we already are, but the quotient of ownership will go, and I'm sure that we'll continue to deliver or rather surpass the expectation of our investors. Thank you.